Debussy's first Arabesque is one of his iconic pieces and it's a fabulous piece of music to learn. Stay tuned for a full tutorial. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists or indeed anybody who loves piano to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it's your first trip here, then please do consider subscribing. Simply click the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your screen now and it's all done for you. I guess as far as Debussy's music is concerned, the piece that's probably only better known than this first Arabesque is the Clair de Lune, of course. Now, Henle rates this as a 4 out of 9, which is sort of medium difficulty, and therefore puts it well within the grasp of most of us. If you're not familiar with the Henle system, then I've linked the video that I did on this below for you so that you can learn all about it. Personally, I do find it slightly more difficult to play than the Clair de Lune, but maybe that's just me. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive straight into it. The piece is in E major, so 4 sharps, and is written in 4/4 time, 4 quarter notes to the bar. Debussy marks it as andantino con moto, so on the slower side, but still with some movement. As always, I'm going to take you through what I think are the most awkward parts of the piece. For the other sections, it should simply be a case of learning the notes and working on phrasing, dynamics and the like. The first 2 bars are written in 8th note triplets, which pass between the hands. Whenever we pass from one hand to another, it's easy to introduce some unevenness. And it's important that all 12 notes in each bar flow beautifully as a single phrase. There are a couple of things you can work on to help out here. We have, of course, our familiar rhythms approach. It's also possible to practice parts of it hands separately, to work on the change in direction. However, what I found more helpful was to focus more on joining the thumbs and then adding the full direction. By working on all 3 of these approaches, you should find that it starts to come nice and smooth. Bars 6 to 9 are probably what most people call out first about this piece, the famous 2 against 3 polyrhythm. It's probably the musical phrase also that most stands out in the piece and is best known. I found that getting each hand independently smooth and flowing is far more awkward than the polyrhythm itself, in fact. My recommendation would be to do some serious work hands separately. I have smaller hands and find that the left hand here is quite stretchy, especially the C minor chord. Therefore, just getting this chord smooth isn't simple, so merits a lot of hand separate practice. I didn't find the right hand straightforward either. First, you need to decide on your fingering. There are different options using 4 and 5 here, so find one that feels the most comfortable and enables you to keep the most natural legato. You can practice this using lots of different rhythms and touches, focusing on keeping everything as perfectly even as you can and avoiding any bumps. You'll notice I'm practicing from the octave above here, as this in fact is how it appears in bar 99, so it's an easy way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, as you come to put the two hands together, there are lots of ways you can try and think about this in your mind. You can map out each individual note, so where the hands coincide and where they don't, and work very slowly to get this under your fingers. Alternatively, and I feel that this method works best, you can practice the polyrhythm using an E major scale. This is an idea I saw on a Graham Fitch video. The theory, which I seem to remember Graham attributed to Alfred Cortot, is that you remove as much of the complexity as possible so that you can focus on the single problem of the polyrhythm. First, try just the right hand and ever so slightly accent the triplets so you feel them as units of 3. Next, try just the left hand and accent either pairs or groups of 4 notes ever so slightly. Now try alternating your hands without stopping and keeping a steady pulse. You might find a metronome helps here, and you might also find that it doesn't. Some people hate the clicking, I do. Finally, try putting the two hands together. My advice would be don't rush this process. Take the time it takes, practice the actual notes without ever trying to put your hands together, and practice the polyrhythm only as a scale. Only when you feel you can perfectly control both different elements, that's the notes alone and then the polyrhythm, would I start trying to play the whole lot hands together. The polyrhythm is still here, but not in its extended form. Given the practice we've already done on the earlier bars, it shouldn't be too problematic for us here. I'd be more inclined to focus on the left hand and make sure you can play this comfortably before trying to add the right. When adding the right, pay particular attention to the writ in bar 16. Make sure that the notes with the tenuto marking are perfectly synchronized with the left-hand arpeggios. These bars see a reintroduction of the introductory bars, but this time with a melody note added on top of them. However, lots of practice earlier on the introduction should make this easy enough to play. The left hand here is particularly tricky, at least for me. It doesn't always fit particularly well under my short fat fingers, and I needed to think carefully about how to approach it. Regardless of the size of your hands anyway, I definitely avoid playing this with too open a hand position. Open hand positions, as we know, will lead to tension, and as I discussed in this video, they are even more troublesome for the small-handed pianist. Here I work mostly on the alignment of my fingers, trying to pivot the hand at the wrist to keep the arm as directly behind the fingers playing as practicable. I know that I will be playing this with pedal, so I'm not overly concerned about keeping all the left hand legato in my fingers. If anything, I'm more focusing on letting go of notes and moving my wrist. Then put both hands together, again keeping the tempo very slow. Next, to start to build some speed, use short sections going from one pattern to the start of the next. This helps the hand to get used to the position changes, which can be tricky here, as sometimes 2 or 3 will be required to play between the 2 black keys. Afterwards, also add the right hand to these small sections. Note that we now have 2 in the right hand over 3 in the left in places, so a reversal of our initial polyrhythm. Bars 26 to 33 shouldn't present too much of a problem. However, I think it's worth paying attention to bar 31, which is repeated in bar 33. Again, we are passing between the hands and so need to ensure the transition remains smooth. The next problematic section starts from bar 34 and goes up to bar 37. This could arguably be the most difficult section of this piece, and indeed Graham Fitch specifically calls it out in his Piano Practice eBook series as proving a challenge to many pianists trying to learn the piece. As you look carefully, it's simply an ascending E major scale in thirds, with triplets underneath to be played in the right hand. I would start off learning this by using a nice simple exercise, playing in sort of alternating thirds, if that's the correct way to say it. In general, to be able to play like this even reasonably quickly is not so difficult. Next, we can start to vary the exercise to start working on the triplets. Pay great attention here, as you will likely find that one or more of the groups gives you more problems than the others. I specifically found the group with E in the melody and the G sharp to be the most awkward. To make practice more efficient, then exercise just around any particular problem area and use as many different variants as you can think of. After this, and once you feel each of these exercises has become easy, shall we say, to do, start exploring playing the notes as written. However, think about introducing pauses as you play. This is also where I'd start progressively adding the left hand into the mix. Then start working from bar 32 forwards, leaving your pauses in place, initially at least. Again, once this starts to feel easy, then try playing entirely as written with no pauses. Bars 39 to 46 are especially beautiful, yet shouldn't pose too many challenges. Pay attention to phrasing and voicing to bring out the most in them. The next tricky area is from bars 47 to 54, and more specifically the pattern in bars 47 and 48, which then repeats in bars 51 and 52. This caused me problems mainly, I think, because of a poor choice of fingering. The edition I have suggests starting each group of 6 triplets using the thumb. At slow speeds, this works perfectly fine. However, as you speed it up, it's a fingering that really doesn't fit my hand very well. A while ago I invested in Rami Barniv's The Art of Piano Fingering, and he suggests a hierarchy for deciding on fingering choices. Musical consideration, the health of the hands, making it physically easy and comfortable, and finally making it mentally easy and comfortable. This old fingering is certainly easier on the brain, a repeated pattern of fingers. However, for me, not so much for the hand. I then decided to investigate other fingering options and finally decided on this one. I'm not recommending you follow my suggestion. Rather, I'm recommending that you ensure you don't waste time, as I did, using a fingering that isn't good for you. Try to find out ways of trying your new fingering at speed as quickly as you can. Practicing in short groups can help. These bars contain a fair amount of repeated or very similar material, so I wouldn't work on them until you're almost done with the remainder of the piece, to be honest. The next problem area doesn't really come until bar 89. Here we have another set of arpeggiated figures in the left hand that can be difficult to pull off convincingly and evenly. I'd spent some time thinking about a fingering that might suit your hand. Whilst playing the arpeggio mostly with 4 works for most of this, it doesn't always. One potential solution is to bring finger 3 into play. I found that in fact when using 4 in the ascending part and then 3 when descending, this proves to be a good choice, though it doesn't work for every pattern. Work through it slowly and write your eventual choice of 4 or 3 into the score. Once you've decided on your fingering, my recommendation would be to tackle these bars as we did the initial set at bar 19. We then have some long arpeggios in bars 95 to 98. I actually prefer to split these between the hands, as much an aesthetic choice I guess as anything else. The last little bit to work on is bars 103 to 105. These bars are effectively just repeats of each other, each time one octave higher. It's worth spending some time practicing each individual bar hands together and in rhythms if required. My recommendation would be to work through each of these challenging sections first in isolation, before you try the remainder of the piece. Naturally, depending on your prior experience, you might find some of these challenging parts fairly simple, and it won't take you much effort at all to master them. Whenever you find it more awkward, just spend more time there. As a bonus tip, when you start playing in larger sections, if there's an area that still stubbornly refuses to be reliably right, then rather than playing through that area with wrong notes, allow yourself to revert to one or other of your practice patterns. I hope this has given you plenty of ideas to get you started learning this lovely little piece. As always, listen to as many versions as you possibly can. Fortunately, it's one of those pieces that most great pianists have recorded at one time or another, so you'll find lots of excellent versions on YouTube. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to click the little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.